everybody. I'm Dr. Sujaya Banerjee, and welcome to In the Lead. In the Lead features leaders who speak about their own leadership, their trials, their challenges, their triumphs, their beliefs, their philosophies, so that they may inspire your leadership. Welcome to In the Lead. Our guest on In the Lead today is Ashish Bhasin, an iconic advertising and media professional with a spectacular career spanning 33 years. Ashish started his career with Lintas India and rose to become president of Lintas Media and also lead Low Worldwide's integrated marketing arm before he joined Dentsu as chairman and CEO South Asia. Ashish is currently the CEO APAC and Chairman India Dentsu. Ashish has a strong reputation for being a serial entrepreneur and a rare CEO who is also a passionate evangelist for change, fearlessly challenging the status quo. Ashish is focused on growing businesses and does not hesitate to disrupt his own industry if required to achieve this. He's also known for making tough decisions and has the courage to live by them. Ashish's colleagues see him as a great leader of people, and he has a good track for mentoring several professionals across his illustrious career across countries. He's known for his long-term vision for business and also a pragmatic approach to execution. He believes strongly in the power of collaboration and role models this himself. Not surprisingly, he is the recipient of several awards and much admiration for his exceptional professional success and leadership. Presenting Ashish Bhasin.
Thanks, Sujaya. Happy to be here.
Hi, Ashish, and welcome to In the Lead. So, Ashish, I'm going to start at the start. And I think one of the reputation you have is for being a serial entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is that you're somebody who can start a business from an idea, take it to large proportions. You've done that through your entire career, literally converting an idea into a business. And before you know it, it's a very large and profitable business. You've done the same with your assignment at Dentsu. And I'm going to relate that to, the need of the hour, given the pandemic situation that we are experiencing as a community. In fact, as a global community in the last 18 months, which has just sort of created so much of disruption and completely, upturned everything we thought we understood about business. These are incredible times for organizations to be able to demonstrate really the growth mindset in terms of, having the courage to look vulnerable, to start from the start, to perhaps not count on the systems and processes that worked in the past. I mean, these uncertain times have got people to go back to the drawing board to be able to question everything that they did in structures that were far more predictable. And so my first question to you, especially with your, entrepreneurial strength, is how important do you see entrepreneurship in these times? And can you unbundle what entrepreneurial mindsets would look like? I mean, you're perhaps, a very good candidate to ask these questions to because you've actually done this, through your career. So what is entrepreneurship and the value of entrepreneurship during these times? And more importantly, what would entrepreneurial mindsets constitute? If you can try and help unbundle that for the viewers.
Well, first of all, I personally believe that there is no leader who's not entrepreneurial. If you're not entrepreneurial, you actually cannot be a leader. Entrepreneurial does not necessarily mean that you have to own shares in your company. That's what we normally associate it with. It is more a mindset. One of the things that what makes an entrepreneur, right? One of the things is, we know the obvious ones, that it's your risk taking and so on and so forth. But the biggest thing is that they feel that they own the company. And that's why they're an entrepreneur. Now, whether you're in a salaried job as a leader or whether you're actually a shareholder, if you really do want to be a leader, you've at least got to believe yourself, and people must believe that you have a stake and ownership in the company. And I don't mean stake as in physical share ownership, but your mindset ownership. So there can be no leader who is not entrepreneurial. And if you talk about times today as they prevail, the more uncertain the times are, the more entrepreneurial you have to be. First of all, there is a lot more of volatility. Secondly, there is no, if you're going to do your business in 2022 exactly the same way as you were doing it in, let's say, 2012 or in 2002, you're absolutely certainly going to be out of the business, right? So
Right.
an entrepreneurial mindset allows you to adapt to the changing times. It allows you to take sensible, measured risks, but it also brings with it the passion to make it succeed, right? What characterizes an entrepreneur? The belief in what they're doing, the sense of ownership in what they're doing. They're obsessed. They're almost, it's their biggest passion. If when I go into acquisition meetings and try to, when we've acquired a lot of companies and so on, I always say that the biggest thing is not the money you're paying the other. They actually live life through that, right? So when you have uncertain times, there can be no better mindset than this. It is typified by taking quick, agile decisions that are needed to make things happen in the current circumstances. And that is classic definition of an entrepreneurial mind. And that is indeed what we need, particularly in these post-COVID times where nothing is certain, nothing is safe.
Right. Well said. I think with that, I want to talk a bit about, the various industries which are so severely impacted in these times, whether it's media, whether it's tourism, whether it's hospitality, whether it's events. And you're very closely associated with media, events, and the rest of that in terms of the work you do. Tell me how it is that organizations like yours have managed these times where you're so severely impacted in terms of business. How has it impacted morale? How have you indeed managed survival in these times? I mean, give us some insights on managing basically in industries that have been so severely impacted, and how do you kind of keep things going? And I do know that there is a fair amount of work around recovery that has already begun happening in a very wonderful way, in a very admirable way. But I think what we're trying to understand here is, what does it take to be able to lead an organization that is struggling for survival? And what insights or what hacks can you give people who are part of such organizations to be able to keep the morale and the fighting spirit alive?
Look, in the last 18 months or so, almost every business was impacted. Some were impacted a lot more, some were impacted relatively less. But I doubt you would have a business which could say that they weren't impacted. In fact, some were impacted even favorably. There are digital businesses that gained by this as
Yeah.
well. So
Oh, yeah.
the one thing that was certain was that the status quo definitely changed for everybody, either for the positive or for the negative, but it definitely changed. Now, when you are in a difficult time, I think one thing that leaders need to know is that at times like this, when you're practicing social distancing, you actually have to get closer to your people virtually. And the more you communicate, the more you talk, the more you, because everybody's uncertain. Am I going to have a job tomorrow? Is my client going to remain with me tomorrow? What's going to happen? How long is this going to last? My personal health and safety. Will life ever go back to where it was? These are natural anxieties every single person from junior most to senior most would have in any and every organization. And the truth is that nobody has the answer to most of these questions, right? So the best way you can, as a leader, lead through this is through transparency and through communication. There is a need to talk more and not less to your people, albeit virtually, because you don't have the facility of in times of lockdown, etc., to meet face to face. But today with technology, and to show a lot more empathy than even before. And when I say show, I don't mean show it artificially, but to actually build in a lot more empathy, because everybody is going through a huge amount of anxiety at that bit. And I think together you can get ahead much faster. I think the other bit is that every business needs to pivot itself. There were lots of people were living in denial. Lots of people are living in hope. Both of those are wrong. You can neither live in denial nor live in hope. You've got to plan. You've got to act. You've got to do things differently if you want to achieve something. And you can see some phenomenal examples of that around you. Let's take the hotel and the small sort of hotels and inns and that kind of an industry. It was the most impacted because everything stopped, tourism, travel, everything stopped during lockdown, etc. But there were so many of them, and you can see around that they saw that insight that people were getting bored sitting at home. They just wanted to get out. So they started marketing staycations. They started marketing work from home. And today I know many such smaller ones who otherwise would have toppled over had they not done it, who are actually jam-packed and full and are doing more business than they were in normal times, because everybody wants to go to a Lonavala or an Alibag or a Goa or a Nainital or a wherever and try and work from there. They upped their Wi-Fi. They made it into a staycation package. I think these are these are great examples of
Yeah.
how people adapt and are trying to make changes and adapt, right? Those who are in denial, those who are saying good old days will come back, life will come back to where it was, let's just hang on and see where it goes, they're going to be dinosaurs, they're going to be left behind, right? So in times like these, which are hugely volatile, you've got to be looking for what's the next insight, how can you pivot your business around that, being very careful that you're not taking a silly risk, but you're building upon the strengths that you have. And if you look hard enough, there will be a strength in what you're doing. You may be an events company, your business may have come to zero, but virtual events may be a huge opportunity. Zoom
Mm,
conferences today are a necessity for everybody. Can you
mm,
be the best in that, right? So,
yeah.
so I think that the need at this time and the businesses that will do best in this time are those who are quickest at adopting and who are taking, a future looking view rather than living on those were the good old days, that's how business used to happen, I hope
Yeah.
it goes back to it.
Yeah, I think very powerful thought there on living in denial. But I'm just going to quickly deviate a bit on that living in denial business and go right back to when we started the lockdown last year. Would you agree that most organizations were taken by surprise, despite knowing this is COVID-19? So it had already started, and we already had a lot of reactions and sort of measures that Southeast Asian countries had already begun taking. And despite that, there was an element of surprise. And my reason for talking about living in denial is because organizations spend so much of time by creating crisis management communities. There is, managing business continuity is an important board agenda. And yet, most organizations were caught napping when they were when we went into the lockdown. And so I want a reaction from you on that. Would you sort of agree that, a lot of this business continuity that we talk about or crisis teams that we talk about didn't actually come alive in the crisis? In fact, there were so many organizations that figured that the teams they'd identified were people who'd already left. And so even the teams that were supposed to actually take on charge were actually not available within the organization. And I'm not talking about small organizations when I'm saying that.
It is a fact that everybody was caught by surprise, and that's no surprise because it's a once in 100-year event. Not just
Mm,
this generation, but two or three generations before us, 2 or 3 generations of managers before us have never experienced something like this. Which is, you have a crisis in one market or in one area, but to have a crisis which is in all markets in all areas so quickly, so rapidly, and just shutting the world down, I don't
yeah,
think the few generations had experienced it. So
yeah,
it was a black swan event or 1 in 100-year
yeah,
event, etc. And by definition, most people therefore don't see that, or almost everybody doesn't see that coming in, which is why it is a surprise. But I think those who had sensible business continuity planning. So I had the advantage because I was in Singapore, and
yeah.
we have
Yeah,
a
I
we
was going
actually
to
have
call that out that, organizations that already have an Asia Pac presence were easily better prepared because it was kind of brought on internally through internal mechanisms, whereas the ones who didn't have that advantage were kind of
no,
left
but
a little behind and
uh,
unprepared.
partly true, but principles of it were the same. So we have, for example, an office in Wuhan, and we were caught unawares, a fairly sizable office in that. We were caught unawares because unheard of thing all of a sudden happens, takes you and by surprise. And before the Chinese New Year last year, which was towards the end of Feb, it was a bit early last year. Before the Chinese New Year itself, you could see that lockdowns and shutting down, etc., was starting to happen in markets like China. Singapore was itself getting impacted, and so on and so forth, right? But where business continuity planning helps in an organization, we have, for example, in Asia Pacific about 12, 13,000 people, right? Within literally a matter of a week or 2 weeks, and the unsung heroes in this are our IT guys in every organization. Within a matter of about 2 weeks or so, 12, 13,000 people were working from home who had never worked from home. Like somebody like me had never ever worked from home
Mm,
ever in
mm,
my life. And we were able to do 80, 90% of our work, right? And we underestimate the amount of planning, thinking, pivoting, etc. back end that needs to go into a complex organization. We are present in 16 countries in APAC with 14,000 people, perhaps more than 150, 200 offices. To pivot that and to make sure that the whole group is coming on to that and work is going on as smoothly as is possible is only because you have BCP and so on. So I think if at all this crisis, what it has done is that it has shone the torchlight on the fact that your preparation, your processes, your principles that you have are more important, and we usually ignore them because we never expect events like these to happen. But if you haven't ignored them and you've got that, the first phase was safety of your people, safety of your, nobody knew what was happening. Second phase was how do you keep the business running on that bit, there was not enough Wi-Fi somewhere, there had to be safety, firewalls, blah, 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 all of that. So it's only because you have those systems and processes which have rehearsed themselves for crises that you can come together and see through this. Of course, an event like this, of this scale, which it happens, you can never be completely prepared for it. And
Yeah.
if tomorrow another such event happens, which today we are not thinking of, again, we will not be prepared for it because you can't, right? In that sense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you have your principles and processes in place, if you have your basic thinking in place, and if you're agile, right, use your common sense and be, that's the most important thing to do at times like these. And if you're agile, I think you can, this crisis has shown you can actually come out a winner on the other side.
So I want to talk about this whole concept of leader being infallible and the hero. And I think in a context like this, where we actually kind of hero worship people who are in leadership positions, increasingly they also become the cynosure of criticism, which is part, of course, part of being in the numero uno sort of job. But I'm going to talk to you about leadership and failure. And I think most organizations, in most cases, leaders want to position themselves as people who have the answers, who have their act together. They're almost compelled to be able to come out as people, who are in a position to lead, because they know, they understand there is a new strategy. They got to be able to reassure not just the board and the other stakeholders. They have their employees and teams which are looking up to be able to know and learn from them. You want to see some light in the darkness. You know that the hero, the leader, is going to show us the way. In an environment like this, where we kind of look at the leader as a hero, I'm keen to understand from you. You sort of are distinctive in the way that you talk about failure very openly, and you have sort of been interviewed on and spoken about even on in the media about your own experiences of failure, including aspiring for jobs that you did not get, or perhaps aspiring to be able to achieve professional success that you believe that you had to work really hard to be able to get there because you had so many impediments to be able to get there. So you're okay to reduce this image of leader as hero, and I'm really interested in being able to sort of pursue that conversation and line of curiosity to be able to understand your ability to talk about failure so openly, and tell us a bit so that the audience is able to understand your comfort with vulnerability and your comfort to be able to seen as somebody who falls and gets up again and can still rise. You had a sort of literally phoenix-like story in terms of rising to great heights after perhaps experiencing different kinds of failure. So tell us a bit about this. It's a very interesting thread, especially because most leaders don't like to talk about their failures.
It makes a good story, Sujaya, but I don't personally feel I've had enough failures to learn from. But nevertheless, I actually feel that a leader has only two jobs to do, just two jobs, nothing else. One is to build more leaders, and the other is to inspire people. Not necessarily in that order, but that's all you have to do. You cannot inspire people if you're not authentic, if you're not transparent. They'll see through you, right? Why would anybody be inspired by somebody who's artificial or plastic?
Yeah, yeah.
And if you're going to be authentic, then you come as a package. Obviously, if you're in a position of success, you've done well, etc., there are lots of strengths you will have. But obviously, as a human being, if you've got those successes, you will have some weaknesses, and you will come with a package of failures which have made you what you are, because every failure is a learning opportunity for you, right? So I think more than anything else, you've got to be transparent, you've got to be authentic, you've got to confess what worked and what didn't work and learn from it. And today, I think leaders who inspire the most are the ones who are most transparent about what they're going through, what they've gone through, and who are real, and who are not trying to put on an act. You can put on an act for some time and get away with it, but you can't put on an act for, you have a 40-year career, you can't put on an act for 40 years. It'll show somewhere or the other, and then there'll be a sense of betrayal of people who look up to you, right? So authenticity cannot come without looking at your flaws as well. So obviously, if you're doing a press release, you will shine the light on the good parts of your achievement and stuff. But everybody knows that there is a journey which has brought you there. There would be ups and downs in every journey. There would be, if you're taking 100 decisions, 60 will be right and 40 will be wrong, and so on and so forth. And what's the harm in talking about it and discuss it? Only makes you more real, as long as you're learning from it, and as long as you're not silly enough to go on making the same mistake 100 times, and you find new mistakes to make. So therefore, I'm very open. I'm very frank about sharing it. I'm one of my best learnings came out from one of my earliest failures. I was doing very well, and I was a leader on the soaps business of Hindustan Lever, which is now Hindustan Unilever in Lintas, and that was the single biggest client in the country, and by far the biggest. And I was really doing well on that. And then I had a very good idea, along with my client jointly, that we should launch a deodorant soap in India. There was no deodorant soap at that. Remember, I'm talking about 25, 30 years ago. There was no deodorant soap in India then. And we researched, and I did a lot of work and with a great amount of passion. And we figured out that Lever had a brand called Shield globally, right? And we said that we can launch that. So there was an R&D center in what was then Hindustan Lever Research Center at Andheri, where now the Hindustan Lever office is in India. And they did a lot of research, and they came up with Shield in India. And we worked. I spearheaded that project from Lindas' side, and we went and like Lever always does, we reached it to a test market. And I remember we were test marketing it, I think in the state of Tamil Nadu, because you first tested in a small area and so on. Everything was perfect. Packaging was really damn good. We got the right price point. The soap was looking excellent. All the research had shown it was good, etc., etc. And then when we went into the market, it tanked. It just completely tanked. The test market was a failure. We put in all the right ingredients, the right amount of media, great communication, everything, right? But the product just didn't take off. And because there was one very important insight we had missed out, which was that an Indian consumer in those days, now it would be different, I'm talking about 30 years ago, didn't believe that a wash away product, soap is a wash away product, could actually provide you deodorancy. It did not have that credibility in them. Because if you're going to put something on you and then wash it away, how's it going to provide you deodorancy through the day? So there was an insight which we hadn't clicked upon. And the smart thing that we did was we immediately realized and we shelved it. Because what happens with, when you're passionate about a project, is that you don't want to see the data that's staring you in your eyes. You don't want to see all of that. And you just want to go pushing on and doing it. We said, no, this is wrong. Step back. Let's take a step back. We saved a huge amount of money by doing that. Otherwise, we would have got national, which would have been 100 times the cost, production, everything, and on that bit. And we then redirected those energies on other premium soaps of Levers like Liril and so on and so forth, and made them much bigger, which then brought in a lot more money for them. So every stage of your life, you learn something from the mistakes that you have made. And in hindsight, when I looked at it, because hindsight is always 2020, it's very clear later on. Hindsight, when I look at it, it's so obvious. Why is it a surprise that a wash away product to an Indian consumer will not provide that, right? Yeah. So one of the things it taught me was that don't take research on at its face value. You've got to figure out 10 stages deeper than what the research or the consumer is even telling you on that. So I think every failure is a great opportunity. Luckily, in my life, I think I've had far more proportion of successes than failures. I'm an optimist by nature, and I don't see those as deterrents. I see them as great experiences and look ahead. Yesterday is over, tomorrow is what matters.
Great stuff. But I think kudos for wanting to put out that vulnerability. It's not common. So great stuff there. So my question to you, Ashish, is what is your advice to anyone who's starting a new job or even starting their career remote and has not, like you, seen the boss, doesn't know who these people are, is joining perhaps from another city, and still needs to make the impact, still needs to learn, still needs to build the relationships. What is your advice to those joining remote starting their careers remote, in fact?
Look, I'll tell you one thing. There's some things that don't change whether you're remote, not remote, or whatever. The advice I would give them is exactly the same advice I would have given them even 3 years ago, before this whole COVID or remote or non-remote, right? If you're starting your career, you just need to make sure the only one thing that's going to make the difference in between you being less successful and more successful is passion. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Put your heart and soul in it and do it with passion. Love it, enjoy it, right? And then it won't matter whether you're remote or you're physically there, etc., etc. And if as a young professional you want to focus on how do I get I want to earn a lot of money, I want to become a CEO, I want to do everybody has that, right? Those ambitions. There's a very good secret formula for that, which I openly share with everybody. Don't concentrate on how much money you're making. Don't concentrate on what your designation is, because all of that will come. Just concentrate on being the best at what you're doing. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. If your job is to be a chef, then just be the best chef in the world. If your job is to be uh, running a company like yours, which is on HR, just run the best HR company in the world. And if you become the best at what you do and only keep the focus on that, you'll amazingly find that everything else falls in place. Money falls in place, power falls in place, designation falls in place. We spend our whole life chasing the wrong end of the tail. We're chasing the we're not chasing what we should be chasing. What we should be chasing is to become the absolute best, so that we are wanted, so that we are needed, so that we are valued. Nobody's going to give you money for charity. Nobody's going to give you power for charity. Nobody's going to give you designation on charity, right? So if you chase that, everything else comes in. We spend all our focus and energy either chasing the money or the designation, or I want a posting here or I want that there, without bothering about am I the best in this business or not. So I would just say to them, bring in passion with any and everything you do, but almost become obsessed by it. Like somebody famously said, dreams are not what you get when you're sleeping in the night. Dreams are what keep you from falling asleep, right? So that level of passion you must bring in, and you must be determined that you're going to be the very best. If you're a poet, you must be the best poet. If you're a cyclist, you must be the best cyclist. And there is enough space for everybody in the world. In an organization, company like ours, for example, doesn't matter whether you're in media or you're in creative or you're in PR or whatever. If you're in PR, just make sure you're the best PR guy in the world or best PR girl in the world. And if you do that, see how everything falls in place for you. So that's my advice to young professionals 5 years ago, during COVID, and hopefully even 10 years later, that just follow this principle. Don't worry about remote, not remote, anything. Just focus on being the best at what you do and bring it in with a lot of passion, a lot of love.
Lovely. Agree with that. Okay. So, 33 years as a professional, largely in the media industry. I'm going to ask, what advice would you give your younger self today? If you had a chance to be able to tell the younger Ashish Bhasin something, what would that be?
If you'd asked me this question 2 years ago, my answer would have been different, but I'll give you my answer in a bit. It's not that it's largely been in the media and advertising industry. It's only been in the media and advertising
Yeah.
industry. I'm a very sort of guy. This is only my
Yeah.
second job,
Mm.
and I'm in my 34th year in advertising and media. That's all I've done all my life. But when you look back, age brings a certain level of wisdom by default, because you've got slapped so many times, you've fallen down so many times, you've gotten up so many times, you've had so many successes, that it builds you with a little bit of wisdom, so to speak. Which when you're younger you never realize it. But if I were to look back, funnily, I would actually run my life exactly the way I did, with the same passion, with the same zest in the same industry. I love advertising, and try to achieve exactly what I've been able to achieve and more on that. But the one thing I would do differently is that I would probably maintain a better work-life balance, which is something I didn't appreciate for the first 32 and a half years of my career, and probably in the last 1.5 years, I'm starting to appreciate it more. I would focus more on my family, friends, my health, my hobbies, because I think I over made sacrifices in areas which I actually needn't have in that sense. And try and get a better balance if I could. When you're younger, you have that zest, that passion. I had that determination and a desire to achieve something, and that overrode everything else at all costs. On all personal costs in that sense. I think I would maintain a little more balance if I were doing it again. But other than that, I would do exactly what I did. I love my job. People talk about Monday morning blues. I look forward to Monday mornings. I'm one of those who's, the weekend making
Makes
notes.
two
Okay,
of us.
I wrote this. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'd probably like to do the same thing as I did in the same profession, and maybe do it even better than what I've been able to. But this element, I would tinker with.
Lovely, super. And so this is, in fact, the epiphany that you were talking about earlier, and it kind of is perhaps the only thing you'd like to change, if at all. And I must say that it's not common to find people who feel so gratified and still so passionate about their careers so many years down the line. I'm going to end this by what should have been perhaps my first question, but we'd end on this note because I'm sure this response is going to be highly inspiring for our viewers, which is, Ashish, if you were to recap your leadership philosophy, what would that be?
Look, not my leadership philosophy, but let me give you my mantra, so to speak. This is something actually my principal told me when I was leaving the 10th standard. And sometimes when somebody tells you something, it sticks in your mind because of the way he phrased it. And it has a lot of interpretations. So he said that Father de Mello is no longer there, he's passed away. But he said that devotion to duty determines your destiny. Many ways what my father is my hero, and in many ways what he did also resonated with this. It is whatever is your duty on hand. If at the moment it is to be a father, if at the moment it's to be a mother, if at the moment it's to be cooking food, if at the moment it's to be leading an organization, whatever it is your duty that you have on hand, you've got to be devoted to your duty, and that's the only thing that will determine your destiny. It's not, a lot of people say that, oh, he had good luck, he had bad luck, he had all the resources, that one didn't have the resources. When you look back in life, you realize it is only the devotion to duty that will determine your destiny. When I haven't been devoted to a certain cause or a certain thing, it hasn't worked out well for me, and therefore my destiny was in my hands. Equally, when I have been devoted, when I have been passionate about something, I have realized that it works. So my mantra, I would leave in daily life. It's not just organization or leadership. And I say that to my children, I say that to my family, everybody. Devotion to duty determines your destiny. Whatever is your duty on hand, be fully devoted to it. Make sure you're doing your damnedest, and you're absolutely the best at it. And you can't go wrong in life if you follow that.
Lovely. I think this has just been such a wonderful conversation, authentic and from the heart. Thank you so much, Ashish, for investing the time, always being so generous with your sharing. I'm sure this is going to be a treat for our viewers. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, in the lead, Ashish Bhasin. Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.